people of the internet? Welcome back to another video. It is I, Don Thomas, back in here with another one. As always, folks, the likes, the comments, the subscribes are all greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for the support on this channel. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into today's topic, folks. I got a video pulled up here. Comes from a channel over on YouTube called The Diary of a CEO Clips. Of course, it's a podcast hosted by Steve Bartlett. I've done reactions to this gentleman and his guest on his platform before. This one in particular jumped out to me. Of course, the video is entitled The Real Reason Men Don't Understand Women. It looks like it's a conversation between, of course, the host of this podcast, Steve Bartlett, and a psychologist, evolutionary psychologist by the name of Dr. Gad Saad. Of course, I see a title, folks. It jumps out to me, strikes my interest. Maybe it strikes yours as well. I'll share my thoughts down in the comment section below. As always, I encourage you guys to share your thoughts down in the comment section below as well. Let's get into it.
On this point of masculinity, just further upstream a little bit, we talked about men approaching women. Now, I have to present the counter narrative to this because I don't think most men understand what it is to be a beautiful woman and what they go through on a daily basis. This ITV made a piece, I think 7 days ago, I saw it on X or Twitter, which showed what it's like to be a beautiful woman walking down the street. Yeah. This was only 7 days ago. There's been a variety of different videos like this, but I'll just play it for you so you can see.
What's going on here?
I'm filming undercover alone in Cardiff, where police recently announced a decrease in violence against women. Within seconds, a group of men approached me. This guy didn't respect my personal space.
I don't mean to be rude or anything, but I saw you. I had to say hello. You look nice. That's fine.
The guy in the black t-shirt sees me up ahead and speeds up to get next to me. And like many others, he overstays his welcome. I think I'll be okay. 20 people approach me in just 2 hours.
Now, I don't think men realise that's the nature of what a woman goes through. So in the context of this conversation about, no, we do have to be on the front foot if we are going to find a mate, when you understand that that's what that beautiful woman that you're thinking about going up to has already gone through, it does change your,
I got you, but I've got a ready deployed answer for that. Life is about modulation, right? Saying the right thing in the right way at the right time, right? I'm sort of paraphrasing a quote of Aristotle, which in the happiness book, I have a whole chapter that is going to address your beautiful woman story. So I talk about the inverted U. Does that ring a bell? Do you know what that is, the inverted U?
I can imagine on a graph.
On a graph, but not this way.
The other way, like a hill.
Right.
Yeah.
So the inverted U is basically the mathematical representation of something that certainly the ancient Greeks taught us long ago, but they weren't the only ones to say this. Everything in moderation, right? So Aristotle, in his golden mean argument, said, look, if you have, let's say, a soldier who's very cowardly, meek, lacking courage, that's not good. If you have a soldier who is so bold, rash, reckless in his risk-taking, that's not good either. So too little is not good, too much is not good, and the sweet spot is in the middle. So in the happiness book, I have an entire chapter whereby I argue that everything in life, the number one universal rule of optimal flourishing is to find the sweet spot, irrespective of any context that you're talking about. And then I demonstrate it through a bewildering number of examples at the neuronal level, at the individual level, at the societal level. Okay, so now let's apply that principle to here, right? Those guys are at the other end of the curve, right? Knowing when to act in the right way, at the right time, in the right measure. That they're not doing that. Because the likelihood of that beautiful girl, when you come up and act like a rather harassing buffoon in that context, of her saying, you know what, I'm sold. Let's have massive sex behind that tree right now. Right? Therefore, we know that statistically speaking, that approach is never going to work. It's done for no other purpose than to harass. Whereas when I'm at a party where we are supposed to be mingling, and I come up to you and I say, forgive me, I hope you don't mind, I just want to say, gorgeous dress. Does that seem like what I just said is similar to how they're acting? So life is about modulation, and those guys are certainly not modulated.
Obviously, there's a bunch of things that are clearly violations.
Let's pause it right there real quick, folks. Of course, shout out to the good brother Steve Bartlett, the host of Diary of a CEO podcast. Of course, typically watch the clips from this podcast from time to time. I'm a fan of his work. I've done reactions to his channel before and conversations that he had with his guests. This one in particular, of course, was entitled, again, The Real Reason Men Don't Understand Women. And one of the topics, of course, that we just watched in the beginning segment of this dialogue was how men approach women, or on the flip side of how women, attractive women, of course, are usually harassed, or how men typically approach attractive women when they're out and about, what are the cases. So, of course, Steve Bartlett was showing a clip of a woman. I guess she was somewhat going undercover, had a camera, whatever the case is, considered an attractive woman, and she was saying, just recording the interactions of men approaching her, the extent, the aggression, I guess the aggressiveness, I guess you could say as well too, of how they were going about doing so, which all ultimately concluded in it being distasteful, right? And then of course you heard this gentleman here, the psychologist, of course, by the name of Dr. Gad Saad, basically was just saying like there's a fine medium, right? There's a fine medium, right? Of how men, specifically in the conversation of men dynamics and women, or men courting women or approaching women. Yes, it is the responsibility of the man to most likely put the best foot forward, make the approach the woman, engage her in conversation, however he goes about it. But there's an art to it, fellas. There's context to it, right? And then of course you don't want to be the shy, timid dude who's unable or incapable of approaching a woman, whatever the case is. So there's a fine line, specifically in this context here. And I guess this is maybe, of course, I watched a little bit more of the clip as well too, but kind of just learning again what we don't understand about women, right? We have men. I feel like the major takeaway, at least from that segment in the beginning, is that assume that an attractive woman has seen it all, heard it all, right? So I know for me, speaking perfectly, anytime, I have my context. If we're asking for, my plays out the playbook in itself, like, I don't necessarily, I'm under the impression, if I come across an attractive woman, I'm just going to assume that you've already heard every single line that there is to hear. I feel like a lot of attractive women, of course, they get told that they're pretty all the time. Men, try to strike them up in conversation, try to crack jokes, or whatever, men's game is, whatever the case is. But if you come across an exceptionally attractive woman, I'm just going to assume that you've heard everything under the sun. So I might not lead with, and again, this gentleman here, of course, gave a scenario where, it depends on the context, depends on the environment. If I'm in an environment where networking and, meeting each other is the context of why we're gathered, then yeah, of course, then that kind of sets the context, as opposed to cold calling, just walking down the street, seeing a girl at a mall or at a bar, whatever the case is. Yeah, like it all depends on the context. So in that segment, of course, is there as well too. Of course, I guess the main takeaway of that segment again was just how men should be mindful of how on the receiving end, right, the gestures and our way of approaching a woman, we got to take into consideration that we don't cross women's personal space, women's comfort level, whatever the case is, and just assume that you're probably one of many men who's tried to shoot that shot, whatever the case is, when it comes to courting a woman, an attractive woman. Let's watch a little bit more, see if there's a little bit more context. Of course, I like watching segments like this. Of course, I like understanding, with the modern day understanding of, men and women dynamics, of course, relationships, things of that nature. We talk about that a lot on this channel. Let's see if there's any more context or dialogue within this conversation that we could get some nuggets from, right?
Obviously, there's a bunch of things that are clearly violations there. Of everything you've just said about the right place, the right time. They look drunk. It's very late. She's alone, so she's in a position of vulnerability in many respects. So rolling up to her in such a way is. But from the male perspective, you said the probability of getting a good outcome there is so low. But from the male perspective, they're probably thinking, listen, if the probability is 0.0001,
Why not?
I'll take it. They're probably thinking that.
Well, by the way, yeah, perhaps, but if you were an empathetic person, you'd say the fact that she may feel threatened is enough reason
not to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Therefore,
right.
to me, they're all assholes.
I agree. And I at the heart of this, though, is this idea of self-awareness.
Exactly.
Because the men that rolled up there, they might in their own heads think they have a chance. They might have a distorted view of their probability. I mean, one of them...
That don't work,
said, hey,
fellas.
do you want some tennis lessons? I'm a tennis coach. And from what I saw in the video, he was a good 30, 40 years older than her.
Yeah.
And in his head, he must have thought that the effort he's exerting there is worth the probability that he's assumed.
Right.
Because there's just like no self-awareness. And I think at the heart of this is like, how do you build that self-awareness to know?
Oh, I love that you're asking this, because one of the things that frustrates me the most in social interactions is when, so I'm not a beautiful woman, so I don't get that violation, but I get a million other violations for all sorts of reasons. One of which is that people do recognize me a lot and they do come up, so they don't do it because they're trying to get me behind the bushes, but then they'll stop me and lecture for the next 25 minutes about whatever idea they're having in their head. Now, I'm polite. I'm thankful that people appreciate my work and will come up, but I didn't sign up while I'm walking with my children and wife for you to lecture me for 25 minutes uninterrupted without me saying a word. If you come up and say, oh, I read The Perfect Mind, professor, loved it. Do you mind if I take a picture with you? I'm always gracious. So all of those social faux pas almost all of them could be linked to what you said, which is a complete lack of self-awareness.
Self-awareness,
Let's break it down even more. There is a concept in psychology called theory of mind. Are you familiar with it?
No.
Theory of mind is a ability that you must have in order to have meaningful social interaction. What does theory of mind mean? When I'm chatting with you, I have to be able to put myself in your mind. So for example, if I'm talking to an audience that knows nothing about evolutionary psychology, I might alter the specific words I use because I have theory of mind that makes me say they don't know what domain-specific computational systems would be. If I use those words, I just lost. Not because they're dumb, but because they don't know that jargon. So I already exhibited a good communicator skill, which is I put myself in the theory of mind of my audience and I modulate my message depending on who I'm speaking to.
Let's pause it right there. So there you have it, folks. Nice takeaway there. Of course, I like the conversation, the dialogue that was being held between both of these gentlemen. Again, shout out to them. Shout out to Steve Bartlett and the Diary of a CEO podcast. There you have it, folks. Self-awareness, empathy, right? Some of the things that they were speaking on, of course, just or lack thereof, fellas, man. And this could go both ways, of course, but speaking within the context of this clip, self-awareness, empathy, man, just like putting yourself in her shoes, fellas. Fellas, man, like I say this all the time, bro. Like there's a lot that goes into courting an attractive woman or any woman. Let's just say any woman, whatever the case is. But in this video, of course, they're talking about the lack thereof of self-awareness and the harassment that a woman may go through, right? The POV of a woman who's going about her business, minding her day, whatever the case is, and being approached by numerous men aggressively, or without whatever the case is, without consent, whatever the case is. It's just like, fellas, sometimes we might think, and then granted, of course, the context was maybe they were out at a bar. It looks like she was doing a little bit of bar hopping, whatever the case is, but that shouldn't still dismiss the common decency factor, right? There should still be a common decency. There should still be a level of empathy. There should still be a level, especially the times that we're living in now. Like the times that we're living in now, i.e. Me Too movement, i.e. her word over yours, i.e. like we're living in some scary times to be a man. Let's just keep it real. And some women could say it's a scary time to be women as well too. But specifically in this context, where we've seen on numerous occasions where most situations they're gonna believe the narrative of the woman over the man. In most situations, it's very strange for men to be so aggressive when approaching an attractive woman. All things considered, I would think you would maybe move with a little bit more caution and seeing to it that she's comfortable and seeing to it that maybe vibes or energy is not misconstrued or whatever the case is. So I think that's the main takeaway of this whole clip. Again, the video is entitled "The Real Reason Men Don't Understand Women." It's just maybe lack of self-awareness, lack of decent home training, lack of empathy, things of that nature. I think that those are the main things that I feel like are plaguing our society right now. It's just like people are not self-aware. People don't take the time to put themselves in other people's shoes, and that's why we live in a society that we live in now. So those are just my thoughts. Of course, those are my takeaways that I gathered from this clip. Of course, very, very interesting dynamic. Of course, I like speaking on these things from time to time. The real reason men don't understand women, from what I took away from this clip, is that we lack the self-awareness sometimes, or just the ability to put ourselves in that woman's shoes. If you were a woman, fellas, I'm talking to y'all real quick. If you were an attractive woman, would you want a drunkard man or whatever, a sober man, approaching you? Like, how would you want that? Or even if it's not you, the woman, like if you had a daughter or a niece or a cousin or a mom or whatever the case is, like as a man, come on, fellas, we know how men can be. We know how we can be when we're trying to court women, attract women, impress women, whatever the case is. I've seen men go to some lengthy measures just to try to court a woman. Sometimes with respect, sometimes with disrespect, sometimes with class, sometimes without class, So again, man, put yourself in the shoes of that woman. Like, how would you want to be approached? You see what I'm saying? Like, how would you want to be approached in that situation if you really want to have a high chance of getting her number, taking her out, get her to know her, whatever the case is? Nonetheless, though, of course, those are my thoughts. I want to hear yours down in the comment section below. As always, the likes, the comments, the subscribes are all greatly appreciated. I will catch you guys on the next one.